Hey babe, welcome to By the Hour, where we chat and reflect and keep your vibe in check. Today's word of the day is nostalgia. The past couple of days, I've been in a very nostalgic mood. And so I was like, you know what? For this episode, I really want to talk about my upbringing, my childhood, being born and bred in Hackney and just, life in general so that you guys can get to know me a little bit more. Because, my first episode, I went in and sort of like reflected on the past year and a half and like where I was back then and where I am now. And then the second episode, I went into, my breakup and my healing journey and that whole story. So I was like, you know what? Today I want to take it back. I want you guys to get to know me a little bit more because, of course, I've been posting on TikTok and sharing some stories and, moments with you guys, but I don't feel like you fully know me, if that makes sense. So, I was like, let's talk about my childhood. Let's talk about, like growing up in Hackney, what it was like, my upbringing, my family dynamic and all that jazz. So without further ado, let's start from the beginning. So as you guys know, my name is Awa and I have always been a very creative, quirky individual, even as a child. And luckily, as a child, I was able to explore that creativity and that imagination that I had. So, yes, let's take it back. I am Gambian and I have spoken about this in a few TikToks and everything. So, I was raised by a Gambian mother. My family are from Gambia, but I have grandparents on, I think, my dad's side as well. We'll get into that because that's another story. But on my mum's side, they're originally from Senegal. So, my great grandmother she's not with us anymore, unfortunately, but she was from Senegal. And then she moved over to Gambia with my grandmother. And that's the beginnings of our family. So a lot of Gambians say that they're Senegambian because essentially it's kind of the same place, same culture, same everything. So yes, I am Gambian. So I was raised by a Gambian mother, raised by a single mother at that. And my early years were interesting to say the least. I think, I'm trying to think what my earliest memory is. And funnily enough, I remember my mum changing my nappy. I think I must have been like 3. I don't know when I stopped wearing nappies, but I literally remember my mum changing my nappy and I just jumped off the bed and I ran upstairs. When I was young, I used to have this massive frog. I don't know who got it for me, but like I imagine like I was so tiny and this frog was huge. And so I used to sit in it. And so I think I ran upstairs and I went to throw myself on the frog, and that's my earliest memory. So I think my early years were very, I don't know how to explain it. Like they were good from what I remember. So like just up until the age of like 5 or 6, I remember like I really loved watching the Tweenies. I watched, all of the like old school TV shows, like Bear in the Big Blue House was my favorite. So I used to watch all of that, Bananas in Pajamas. I loved Postman Pat, all those like sort of 90s, early 2000s, like kids TV shows. Like I grew up watching that. And I think I was just a very creative child from the beginning. And I have a family friend who I refer to as my godfather, who really brought that out of me. So essentially, my mum raised me on her own. We lived in Hackney. Hackney's all that I know. I was born in Homerton Hospital in the Starlight ward, to be precise. And Hackney's all I know, basically. I think my mum and I, when she had me, she lived in Stoke Newington first. Then she moved over to Dalston. And so when she moved to, my childhood home, in Dalston, there was a neighbour. And so my mum, I think she said she was like going to throw the bin one day. And so we lived in like a semi-detached flat house thing. How do you I forgot what it's actually called, but it's like a semi-detached house and we lived downstairs and he lived upstairs. And so she said that she one day was like going to throw the bin or something. And then she heard someone coming down the stairs, like from the flat above. And then she hadn't met the person yet. So she was like, oh, might as well introduce herself. And then, they met in the like sort of front bit because we had a communal door, and then it was our door and his door. They met there. And then she was like, hey, I'm so-and-so. And then he introduced himself, and he was like, oh, I just got back from Gambia. And my mum was like, oh, I'm from Gambia. And so it was just like so divine. It was so weird. It was, random. And from then onwards, we basically became family. And he is very quirky and very unique, but he means so much to me. And he didn't have children. He didn't have, a partner. He lived on his own. And he was back and forth, from Gambia to here and everything. And so he used to go back home to like, help the community and everything. And he became close with my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and my uncles and aunties back there, and just my family back in Gambia, which was like really nice. And my grandma would like send him back with a lot of things, like that generation. Like he would come back with fish in his suitcase. He would come back with like ground nuts. He would come back with wonjo. If you're Gambian, you know what wonjo is. It's basically hibiscus, like a hibiscus drink. He would come back with wonjo. He would come back with like lots of things actually. But yeah, he grew like a close connection with my family back home and everything. But he was definitely someone who allowed me to express myself creatively, because he was a creative. He was doing photography. He had loads of instruments that he would let me play. So I would always like run up the stairs and go to his house, like, because he would always leave his door open because it was just us, And so I think he said like he would do it because I would always like knock on his door to come in and whatever. So one day he was like, I might as well just leave it open. So I would always like go up to his, and he had this massive keyboard, this massive piano. So I'd go upstairs and play his piano. He would let me play his guitar. And then he would buy me paints and everything. So I would paint with him and everything. So he was a very creative person. And at this point, my mum was at college, I believe. And so he essentially became my caregiver and everything. And so I was able to, really express myself creatively through him. And he really loved music. One thing about me, music has always been my passion. And I think that came from him because he always played like music from all genres, from, Michael Jackson to The Police to, there's a Malian artist, I forgot his name. I think he's from Mali. I can't remember his name, but he would listen to Malian music. He would listen to Motown, rock, pop, anything you can think of, reggae. Like he loved Missy Elliott. I remember, I don't know what album it is of Missy Elliott's, but the album cover used to scare me. So he would always like sort of turn it away so that I wasn't afraid. But yeah, like I grew up like with so much knowledge of music and so many sounds. And on top of that, my mum was always playing Senegalese music. So I grew up listening to Youssou N'Dour and Thione Seck and all these people. Like, oh gosh, like I just loved music. I loved music. Like every time my mum would like, clean on the weekends, she would just turn on the, not radio, but again, I'm from that era where it's like old school, but then new school. So I'm 27. I was born in 1998. So I got a taste of like the old school way of doing things, of like, the cassette tapes and like, when you would like roll the, I don't know how to explain it. I kind of feel like the younger generation are not going to understand, but I literally grew up in the era of cassette tapes, Blockbuster, knocking for your friends. And then once the internet was like really a thing, like emailing my friends to hang out, like we didn't have iMessage and all of that. That came in later. So I grew up in that era. And yeah, my mum had this big tape player, like everyone had it. I think all of us who grew up in that era and who were part of that generation, our parents had those massive tapes in the living room, right? Like those cassette players is what I'm trying to say. So every weekend my mum would clean, she would put the music on and she would listen to Youssou N'Dour. And of course, a lot of people may not know who Youssou N'Dour is. So he's a Senegalese artist and he sings in Wolof. So the language in Senegal is Wolof, and in Gambia we speak it too. I think obviously the official language in Gambia is English, but I don't know what's spoken more. It's either Wolof or Mandinka, but I'm assuming it's Wolof. But anyways, so he sings in Wolof, but I don't understand it. But to me, it didn't matter. I just loved the instrumentation, the sounds, just how it used to make me feel. Is the feeling that was important to me. I didn't really care about the words. And of course, like I would ask my mum, oh, what's he singing about? You know, one of my favorite songs of his is the English translation is Things Unspoken. So it's on Spotify, but it's Les Wahul. And I just, every time I would hear the horns, I was just like, this is just such an amazing song. So I grew up listening to all sorts of music, right? So yeah, I was very creative, I was quite shy as well. You know, a lot of people would always say, oh, I was very shy. She's very quiet and very timid. I think a part of that is true. Like I was shy, but it took a while for me to open up to people. I was just very reserved. And I think that's also a thing that I got from my mum. My mum is very, well, she has parts of her, but for the most part, she's a very tame, laid back person. And also Gambians are like that as well. We're just very chilled people. And that's just a cultural thing, I think. We just like peace. We don't like problems, you know? And I think that's part of the reason why it's called the Smiling Coast of Africa, because everyone's just so happy and like good vibes, you know? So growing up, I was very chill, very laid back, very shy. I was very introverted, but like when it came to things that I was passionate about, like music or painting or art or anything creative, I would come out of my shell. And luckily I had my godfather there to, you know, encourage that. My mum, I don't think she really understood it. And the thing is, my mum wasn't around as much, like when I think about it in hindsight, because again, during that period of time, you know, my early years, she was at college. And then later on, she went to uni and now she's a nurse. So she went to uni to study nursing. And my mum has been a nurse in the NHS for many years now. I don't know how long it's been, I think over 15 years. And I just remember having to go to so many people's houses, having so many people look after me, because obviously when you're a nurse, you're working long hours. It's intense. And when she was at uni, it was intense as well. I just remember she used to sit at the computer. And again, I grew up in that era where we had, my generation, we call it back off computers. So it used to have like a back off, like a back. So we had those massive TVs and computers, and so I just remember she used to sit at her desk at her computer till like crazy hours in the morning, just studying and, you know, focusing. And back then, you know, I think a lot of people used to, you know, write essays by hand, so she was doing that as well. So she didn't really have much time for me, unfortunately. So I had to, yeah, spend time on my own, trying to distract my mind, I guess, because my mum didn't really have time for me, which was pretty sad. And, you know, once she graduated and she finally became a nurse and everything, yeah, I had to be looked after by so many different people, by family members. So like my aunts, family friends, my godfather, my friends' parents as well. So I was in the hands of so many different people. So I didn't really have much stability when I was a kid, if I'm being honest. And that's something that I didn't realize until recently, actually. I was always with other people. And I didn't really like that. I have always been someone who struggles with change. I like being in my comfort zone. I like knowing what's coming next. I don't like my days to be so different. Not so much now, I'm more open to it, but definitely when I was younger. So like being with like my best friend's family, for example, and then another week I'm with my aunt or a family friend, or, you know, like it was just too much for me. I just wanted to be at home with my mum. But of course, she had to grind, she had to make money, she had to work. I totally understand that. So yeah, my younger years I spent, you know, being creative, drawing. I really loved art. I really loved painting, making things. Like my godfather was really good at like encouraging that. And the house that we lived in, we had a garden. So it was split between my mum and I and with him. But, I would always go into his garden anyway. And he's, really into gardening and plants and everything. And so I would help him out in the garden. And in our garden, my mum and I's garden, we had an apple tree. And so I would always like eat the apples. And then at some point we had strawberries. Like my childhood was like, from what I remember, it was really good. I had fun. I really enjoyed being one with nature. I really enjoyed being in the garden, helping out my godfather. I remember one time I was so like intrigued by like finding treasure. So I remember like digging in his garden, and then I found like these little bits of china. And then I kept digging and I was finding more and more pieces. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like maybe there's like a time capsule. Like I was so obsessed with like trying to find treasure. And if I'm being honest, my childhood at that point felt like it was bliss. It was like just so cool to do things. And I remember like, I think all of us have done this, like creating potions and like perfumes. So luckily, I think we had fennel in our garden or something like that. Fennel smells like, I can't even describe it, but it smells very like holistic and organic and wholesome, or whatever you want to call it. So we had a fennel plant. And so I would like, pluck it and put it in water. And then I remember one time my mum and my godfather took me to Margate for the first time. And I had so much fun. And I remember we went to like one of the shops and there was like this like glass perfume bottle. And I was like, oh, please, can I get it so that I can actually make perfume? So they bought it for me. And then I remember the next time I was in the garden, I was so excited to make my perfume. I was like, yes, I've got this perfume bottle. So then I took some of the fennel. And I think also there was, if I'm not mistaken, lavender. I could be wrong, but I do remember having lavender. I might have had like lavender oil, but I had like my bottle and I put some fennel and water in it. And then I had some lavender, and I was just so proud of myself. So yeah, my childhood consisted of me like just doing things like that, and spending a lot of time with other people, my godfather, family, friends, my friends, family. And so I didn't have much time with my mum, unfortunately. So up until the age of, I think, 5 or 6, I pretty much was in the hands of other people after that, So I spent time with my mum and my godfather. And then, yeah, things changed, And so I noticed that my mum became a bit more stressed. She wasn't as, willing to like talk to me or hang out with me and stuff like that. And so I think, to be honest, that's when our dynamic changed. Now, in my early TikTok videos, I did speak about being the eldest daughter and also my relationship with my mum not being the greatest. Thank God, at present, it's so much better. But if I think back to those times, I definitely noticed a change in my mum when I was about 6 or 7. And I think it definitely was due to her feeling pressure, like so much pressure to, graduate. And then she graduated, and then going into the NHS as a nurse, and then raising me on her own. Like, she didn't have help from my dad. My dad wasn't around. And gosh, I think this episode is going to have to be split into 2, because honestly, like, my life story is crazy. I've, touched on it a few times in, some of my episodes and some of my TikToks as well. But I could honestly write a novel. I could write a novel, and I'm only 27. So yeah, so my mum, I feel like she felt the pressure of like coming from a different country, being an immigrant, being a black lady on her own, raising her child. My mum had me when she was 23 years old. And the fact that I'm 27 right now, I can't even fathom that. I'm just like, I don't know how she did it, because how do you go from being in a different country, a different culture? Gambia is so different to the UK, obviously, So coming from West Africa to the UK, to a completely different culture. And I know my mum had culture shock, because even till this day, she'll say like, I don't understand why certain British people do these things. Do you get what I mean? So, being an immigrant in this like foreign country on your own, and then to have me at such a young age and to not have that support from my dad, like it was a lot. And I see that now. But I think, during my like teens when things were really bad between us, I didn't understand that. But anyways, I noticed a change in her. So she was more stressed. She didn't want to talk. She would push me away. She would, keep me at arm's length. Like she was just it was like talking to a brick wall. Um, and my mum was quite hot and cold with me as well. Like she had moments where she was great. Like she wanted to play with me when I was young. Like I think when I was like 4 or 5, she would read books to me, but then she kind of stopped doing that. Um, and so, she had moments where she was like really chilled and really happy and everything. And then the next day she wasn't in the mood. She would shout at me or she would tell me to leave her alone and stuff like that. So I experienced hot and cold energy at a young age. Let's just say that. So yeah, things changed, the dynamic changed, and then I started to absorb that. I'm an empath and I understand why, because I had to be so hyper vigilant. I had to be very like, I had to learn my mum's behavior in order to anticipate her next move, because I just didn't want to do anything that would like piss her off or that would make her push me away. So I had to really suss out when she was in a good mood and when she was in a bad mood. So then I could tailor my behavior to that so that I could make her happy, so that I could please her. Um, and yeah, like I just started to absorb her energy. So whenever she was in a bad mood, I would feel down. Whenever she was in a good mood, I'd feel good. And yeah, I think things started to pile up for her, with work and just life in general, and trying to raise me and trying to keep herself afloat, keep both of us afloat. Um, and we had some rough years, to be honest. I won't like talk too much on that because I don't want to put that out there, because it's not only my story, it's hers as well. I don't want her to, because the thing is, right, the culture that I'm from and a lot of African cultures are so afraid of what people would say and think. And she says that all the time. She's like, oh, what if so-and-so says something? What if people say this? And it makes me sad, because it's like, I kind of wish that generation would speak about their troubles more, because it would help them and it would help us. It would help the world knowing how they truly feel and like what they've been through. And as much as I would love to go into detail about like how much we struggled when I was a kid, I just don't feel comfortable doing that because it's her story as well, But let's just say things were, at some point things got difficult. Things were hard. I don't, I was saying this to someone where like, I remember at some point, you would go to bed for dinner. If there were times where I had to go to bed for dinner. Now, if you don't understand what I mean, basically there was no food. So because I was hungry, I had to go to bed, because I would rather go to bed early, and I didn't like going to bed. I always wanted to stay up and watch TV and do things. But because things were so difficult and we couldn't afford certain things, like my dinner was my bedtime. There was no food, you know. And there's other things as well, like the things that we went through, my goodness, my mum is a very strong woman. I don't know how she managed to get through all of that. I don't know how she raised me, if I'm being honest. But I kind of attribute that to me being an easy child. I wasn't hyperactive. I wasn't difficult. I think I became difficult in my teens because obviously there was all of that trauma and everything that I went through as a kid. And so, at some point that does come back to like bite you in a way. So I would say I kind of started acting out in my teens. Well, it kind of started earlier than that, but I'll get to that anyway. But I was a very easy kid to deal with, very shy, very timid and everything. So yeah, so we had some tough times. Yeah, it was very difficult. But I had my godfather there as well as a shoulder to cry on. And so whenever my mum wasn't in the mood or she didn't want to deal with me, I would just go to him and I would, play his instruments. At some point he got me a guitar as well. So I was doing that. And then he actually would take me to violin lessons as well. So I learned how to play the violin. So I had all these like sort of like extracurricular things, which was really good for me because home wasn't great anymore. I felt really down. And I remember as a kid, like I would always say I felt small. And I didn't know what I meant by that. But now that I'm older, I was depressed. I was depressed as a child. I felt like I didn't matter to my mum because she just kept pushing me away. She would always shout at me. Whenever she was stressed, like I remember like she would come back from work. She would literally walk past the living room. She wouldn't say hi to me. She would, you know, go undress, wash her hands because obviously she's a nurse. So she would come in her uniform and put her uniform away. She would shower. And then there were times where she would just go straight to bed. And I would think, wow, like, why is my mom sleeping so much? Like, she would just, yeah, she wouldn't say anything to me. She wouldn't talk to me. And there were times where I had the courage to like say that to her. I was like, Mom, why don't you want to talk to me? Like, what have I done wrong? Like, why do you hate me? And so I think that would trigger her, and she'd be like, I just don't want to talk. Like, she wouldn't even say, oh, I don't hate you. So her not reassuring me made me feel like what I was saying was true, because I was like, well, my mum comes back from work and she just walks past me and she doesn't say anything. She doesn't talk to me. She doesn't engage with me. And then I'm telling you this. I'm telling you, oh, I feel like you hate me or you don't like me. And you're not even like denying that. So then I thought it was true. And so this is where I realized that I was just like not important. And I think I was around the age of like, I want to say 7, 8. So from here onwards is when things sort of went downhill between her and I. So we'd go back and forth, and, I'd express my frustration. Even as a kid, I would say, I feel like I'm invisible. I always used to say I felt invisible and that I didn't matter. And sometimes she would react and be like, oh, I'm just tired and this and the third, or she wouldn't say anything at all. And then as I got older and I would become a bit more vocal and I would say these things, and even in my early teens when we would argue and everything, my mum adopted this thing of just being silent. So I would be here shouting, screaming and like being upset, and she would literally just look me dead in the eyes. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's called stonewalling, when you ignore someone who is like, talking to you or like trying to interact with you. I believe it's called stonewalling, but it literally felt like I was talking to a brick wall. Like, she would not give me anything. And I think that it's so painful. It's so painful. Like, having someone shout at you is bad, but then having someone ignore you while you're trying to express yourself, even as a child, is really hard. So that's what I experienced. And so, yeah, this period of my life was just so difficult. At school, I was good. I was a good kid, I was really smart. I wasn't the best at maths. I think I really struggled with maths. But everything else I was so good at. English, I was so imaginative. Like, when you would write these stories and all of that, like I was so good at that. Of course, music was, number one for me, art and everything. And I did really well at school. I was friends with everyone, and I've always been that way. I have friends of all walks of life. And like at school, I was friends with the girls, of course, friends with the boys. The thing about me, like when I was young, I I wanted to do everything that the boys were doing. So, the boys would play football and I wanted to play football. So I'd play football with them. I wasn't good at it, I'm not going to lie, but yay, I just wanted to do it. And then I remember the era of match attacks. So match attacks were these like cards, these football cards, so you could collect them. And the boys were doing that. And so I remember like buying a couple of packs, and I didn't really understand it. I didn't watch football like that, if I'm being honest, but I just thought it was cool. So yeah, I just wanted to do everything that the boys did because I just wanted to like sort of prove that girls could do it too. And yeah, like primary school was really cool. I had so many friends that I'm still, friends with till this very day, which is very rare, but I'm so grateful for it. And for a couple of birthdays, I would have bonfire nights. So my godfather would put on these bonfire nights and I'd invite my friends round, and I had a good time with my friends. And primary school was cool. I went to Queensbridge Primary School in Hackney. So yeah, like I just remember like really enjoying primary school. I didn't like getting up early. That's one thing I didn't like about it, but I enjoyed school, I was good at it. I'd get good, was it grades? I'm not that old, but for some reason I don't remember much, but all I know is like I did really well. And like the teachers would always say to my mum, "Oh, I was really, really smart. She's very intelligent," which is good. But then at the same time, it kind of felt like, why is that a surprise to you? Do you get what I mean? It was just like, is it because I'm a young black kid, you're questioning my intelligence? But that's me going too deep into it. But yeah, the teachers would always say I was, very good, a good kid. And then I remember, what year was I in? I think I was in like year 3 or year 4. And I loved poetry. I was really good at English, but I really loved poetry. And one day, one of the teachers came to me and was like, "Oh, we want to enter you in the BBC Off by Heart competition with Michael Rosen." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be on TV. I want to meet Michael Rosen." And I was so excited. And so I did that competition. I have not seen that footage till this very day. I, for years, have been searching it up. Like there's some clips online of Off by Heart, but I've never seen my episode or whatever. But I remember going to that. I think we filmed it in like a library in Islington or something like that. And I remember going and meeting Michael Rosen, and basically we had to choose from these different poems, and I chose a poem about a crocodile, I think. I can't remember that exact poem. I could be wrong, but I remember performing it in front of them and Michael Rosen, and I had so much energy. I was so confident, and I genuinely thought I was going to win. I came second, but they said I was really good. So I was always into things like this. And then at some point as well, during secondary school, I don't know if I told this story. I might have. I can't remember. I think I did in one of the episodes, or I've told it somewhere anyway. The whole thing of me being an extra in Footballers' Wives. I think I told that already, but my brain, I got ADHD. But I did that. I can't remember what else I did in primary school, but I did a lot of things. So yeah, school was really, really good, but home wasn't. But I think I used school as an escape. I was able to see my friends. I had so many friends. I was part of this friendship group as well. There was 4 of us. So there was 3 black girls and 1 white girl. And we grew up together and we were the best of friends. And, I would stay with some of them sometimes. Like my mum would drop me off in the mornings, and one of my friends' mums would take us swimming every Friday. So we would go swimming, we'd get fish and chips. Like I had a really good time. But like I said, home was not great. So things started to become a bit difficult once I got to year 6. So my behavior was amazing up until then. So I got to year 6 and I started acting out. Even I didn't understand it. I became angry. I was just so disturbed by something, but I didn't understand it. At this point, things between my mum and I weren't great again. Like she just shunned me. She pushed me out. She didn't want to engage with me. And obviously, once you get to a certain age, they allow you to take yourself home and take yourself to school. So I think I started taking myself to school in, I think, year 5. But in year 6, I became a bit more independent. So I had more independence, which was nice, but I still felt quite isolated and lonely. And so I started acting out, and I had a teacher called Mr. Thomas. And you know what, like at the time, it's not that I didn't like him, but I think because I was struggling so much, and so obviously he would tell me off, I didn't like that. And so he would shout at me, or like he would send me out of class, and like I would throw tantrums, and this was just so not like me. And I remember one time there was a boy in my class. He used to fancy me, but it was borderline harassment. I'm not going to lie. It was actually so irritating and I didn't like it. And so I think one day, like he did something to piss me off. So I threw my shoe at him and this was so unlike me. So I got sent out of the class by Mr. Thomas. And so he was shouting at me outside, and then I think I was crying, and then I started like panicking, and he was like, oh, okay. He was like, what's wrong? And I was like, please don't tell my mum. Please don't tell my mum. Because at this point, they hadn't spoken to my mum about my behavior. Um, and like I was really afraid that I would get in trouble, because again, if you're from like an African household or like Jamaican or Caribbean household, if you get in trouble by your teachers, you get in trouble at home. So it was a thing where like I was just like, my mum can't know this, because my mum, to her, I've been perfect. I've been this angel. And then if Mr. Thomas now comes to tell her that I've been acting out, I'm going to get in trouble. Like she might beat me, you know? So I begged him. I was like, please don't tell my mum. Please don't tell my mum. I never told him why, but he didn't. Thank God. He actually listened. And from then onwards, like things were okay between him and I, but I was still kind of acting out. And I just had anger issues. I had anger issues. And obviously at the time, I didn't understand why. Whereas now I get it. I was struggling because my mum and I we weren't getting along. She was pushing me away. I was feeling depressed. I had a lot of anxiety as well. Like I've always been an anxious person. I've had anxiety ever since I was a child. Like I used to panic over sounds in the house. So our flat was like 2 floors, and it was kind of like upside down. So the bedrooms were downstairs and everything else was upstairs. And so, you know, there were times where I would come back from primary school and, you know, my mum wasn't back home yet. So I was in the house by myself. I would panic. I would come in. So like the front door was here, and then you'd come in and the living room was there. I wouldn't even go to the bathroom. I wouldn't go to my bedroom. Even if I needed to pee, I would not go. I would wait until my mum would come back, because I had that much anxiety. Like I wouldn't even change out of my uniform, out of my school clothes, because I was so anxious. I did not want to go downstairs because I just had it in my head that someone was going to kill me. Essentially, like I was always anxious. So like anxiety developed, I was depressed. Like my mental health was just not in a good place when I was young. So I believe when you're in year 6, you're like 10, 11. So imagine, you know, being that age and having all of this anxiety and struggling with your mental health. And then on top of that, having a difficult relationship with your mum. Like it was a lot. It was a lot. And I was an only child at this point. And that's important to note. I was an only child for 13 years. So it was just my mum and I before my siblings came along. So yeah, imagine going from like a really blissful, happy-go-lucky childhood to things just switching just like that. It felt like an overnight thing. It was like going from sunshine to rain. And that was so hard for me as a kid, because I remember my mum being so loving and caring and everything. And then one day she just became numb. It's like there was no life in her, and it was so sad, you know? So yeah, year 6 comes around. I had a bit more autonomy, a bit more independence, which was great. But again, it was lonely. And like I said, I was acting out. Then it was time to go to secondary school. And so I went to the Bridge Academy, if anyone from Hackney knows about the Bridge Academy. And I was so excited. Like I grew up watching all these like American TV shows, and like, you know, when they go to college or high school, sorry, college is the equivalent to university, I believe. When they go off to high school, I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be like that. I'm going to have a locker. I'm going to meet all these people. Like I was so excited for secondary school, and the Bridge Academy was quite new. So I joined in 2009, and I believe it opened in 2007. And it was a music and maths specialist school, but I was so like focused on the music part. I didn't care about the maths. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to a music specialist school. And obviously I loved music. Like I said, I learned how to play the violin when I was young. I did abandon it, so I don't know how to play it anymore. But I've always been a musical person, right? So this was perfect. It was great. And so, yeah, that came round. And obviously the majority of my year group from primary school went to Bridge. So I didn't have any issues making friends. Like I've never struggled to make friends. I've always been very good at, you know, making friends with people. I'm not the most like, well, now I'm more extroverted, but back then I wasn't as extroverted or social. But for some reason, I always had friends, which I was really grateful for, because I feel like if I didn't, or if I experienced bullying, it would have made the situation worse, because I was already going through it with everything at home, you know. So imagine being bullied and not having friends on top of that, or struggling to make friends, you know. So thank God I didn't. So yeah, 2009 comes around and all my friends have chosen to go to the Bridge Academy, and oh gosh, I was so excited, so excited. So I sort of like came out of that like acting out period. I don't know how I managed to do that. Like, it's not like I went to therapy. It's not like I was talking to people more. I think maybe just the change between primary school and secondary school helped, I guess, like being more independent and everything. And it was a new era. So I think I was really excited for that. So I sort of swept all of that under the rug. And as we go on, you'll learn that that's something that I do often. I don't deal with things head on, or I didn't back then. So I just swept all of that under the rug. I prepared for this new adventure, this new school, new beginning. And yeah, I was so excited. I remember that summer the summer before going into secondary school, before the transition, like me and my friends, we would go out. This was the era where you'd go to the park and you would knock for your friends. Like, I remember that. Like, that summer was great. It was great. And yeah, like growing up, I just really enjoyed like spending time with my friends. I really did enjoy my solitude, and that's something that I've always cherished. You know, that's always been a thing for me. I love being alone. I love being alone, you know. But I think I was a bit more like open to going out more when I was a kid, because it was different back then. I don't know if the kids do that anymore. Do you guys I don't think any like young people will be watching this, but if you are, let me know. Do you guys knock for people? I highly doubt it, because now we've got our phones. We message each other on iMessage, WhatsApp, Snapchat, all of that. Back then, we didn't have that. So like primary school days, my friends and I, we lived within the same vicinity, like literally within 5 minutes of each other. So like there was this I don't know what you call it, is in the middle of the road, and there were trees, and we used to call this what did we call it? I need to ask my friends. Treasure Island or something like that. It wasn't actually an island, but we were so imaginative. So like one of the back roads that goes from my house to my other friend's house, and then the other ones as well, there was like this thing in the middle. It was like, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, we called it Treasure Island. So every time we wanted to meet up, like we would email each other and be like, meet at Treasure Island. And it was cute. And so like my friends and I, we would communicate via email. So we would email each other. And yeah, that's just how we would like communicate. Or during summer, like we would knock for each other. So like, again, we lived in the same area. So I would like go to, my friend's house and knock and be like, oh, is so-and-so there? And the parents would be like, no, she's not here. Or like, they'll say, oh yeah, come in. So that's the era that I grew up in, right? And then going into secondary school, that's when like Blackberries became popular. And then you had stuff like BBM. We were using, what is that messenger? The Windows one. I can't remember what it's called. But we would message each other on it, and like, you could change your status and everything. So that's how I would communicate with people. And I was pretty lucky with, that era, the era that I grew up in. Like, I think the people who grew up, I would say the cutoff is probably like 99. Anyone beyond that, I don't know for you. I'm not going to lie. But us lot who were born in 98, we had the best of both worlds. We had, the remnants of the 90s, the early 2000s, and then going into like what technology is like today. So I got to experience, radio. I got to experience MTV. Like when MTV was popping, it was popping. I remember like going home, after school, switching on the TV, MTV would be on, Nelly would be playing, Snoop Dogg, Justin Timberlake, you'd have Britney Spears, Destiny's Child. Like, I remember that era so well, and I miss it so much. Like, that's why the word of the day today is nostalgia, because whenever I think about it, I'm just like, we were so lucky. I got to see technology change over the years. Like I said, our TVs and computers were weird. We had the back off TV. Like, I remember our TV was big. So imagine like one of those, I want to say like, I don't know what inch the TV was, like 40 something inch TV, but with like a huge back. That's what I had. And then my mum had her cassette player, like I said. Like we just, man, sorry, I'm just thinking about it. It was just great. Like we were lucky, I would say. Like our generation was very, very lucky to experience that. And so, yeah, going into secondary school, Blackberries came into play and we had BBM. And so I was able to communicate with my friends more. So I didn't feel as alone, you know. I was able to talk to my friends. I was able to see them. And then, you know, with secondary school as well, because sometimes that can be really difficult, that transition period of like going from primary school and then going into secondary school, because, you know, it's different. Like you're a bit more disciplined, or you have to be, you know, you have more responsibility and independence and all of that. And thankfully, I was always kind of like an independent child anyway. I had to be, because my mum was like pushing me away. So I had to do a lot on my own. So that transition was all right for me, to be honest. And luckily, all of my friends came along with me. So, you know, I didn't really struggle with that. And of course, I made new friends as well. So yeah, started Bridge, and oh my gosh, how am I forgetting this? I remember, so within the first couple of months of Bridge, I had this really horrible eczema flare up. Now, back then, we used to go to Laburnum Boat Club. So Bridge Academy is literally next to Laburnum Boat Club. So it's along the Regent's Canal. And I remember like we used to go, you know, in the canoes and everything and go along the canal. And then I think our last session there, we were able to slide down. We were able to go down the slide with the canoes and everything. And some of us did it and some people capsized. I capsized. So imagine that dirty Regent's Canal. Oh, if you guys are listening to this, or if you're watching, please search up Regent's Canal and see how dirty that water is. So as a kid, I did struggle with eczema. Like I remember I used to itch my skin. I used to cry. Like my mum would have to take me to the GP all the time. Like I really struggled with eczema. But later on, I think that stopped being a thing like when I was like 6 or something. So after that, I didn't really have bad flare-ups like that. So yeah, like within my first couple of weeks of secondary school, I've had this horrible flare-up because of that, because I've capsized and I've entered that dirty water. Disgusting. So I had this horrible flare-up. Like my skin was flaking. Like I literally looked like a lizard. And then it happened on my face. And I was just like, oh no, I've just started this new school. Children are wicked as well. Like they will point out these things, right? So I remember this flare-up was so bad. And my mum used to buy this powder from MAC. And so I would use it to try and cover it up. And it didn't work. Like I looked stupid. And so I had no choice but to go to school. So imagine I've started this new school and my face looks mad. And I just remember people looking at me and being like, you know? And even one of my friends as well, I remember she was like, I was at the table with like 2 new friends that I'd made. Shout out to Demi. I wonder if she remembers this, because she saved me. And imagine, like, one of the girls, like, we came from the same secondary school and we were actually friends. Like, we were in the same group of friends. And so she came by, she's like, right, Albert, what happened to your face? Like, what's going on? Then Demi was like, she's got eczema, okay? Like, she defended me and I was like, thank God. So then after that, no one ever said anything. But I just remember feeling so anxious, feeling so, like, self-conscious. But then eventually it cleared up, of course, but I was just like, how can I start this new school like this? I look like a snake. I look like a lizard, like, you know, so that really affected my confidence. And then I don't know if it was like year 7 or year 8, I fell out with my best friend. So as I mentioned before, I was in a group of 4. So there was 4 of us. We were all best friends. But I was closer to one of them. And I can't even remember the reason. I think we went to one of our friends' birthday parties, like we slept over, and me and my best friend, we fell out and I said something and I know what I said wasn't nice. I can't remember what I said exactly. And she took that to heart and then she stopped speaking to me. And yeah, that created a divide between 4 of us. And obviously I don't know what happened there. I don't want to say she turned the other two against me, but I think things were like really awkward, and we would all walk home together. And I just remember one time like the other two weren't talking to me, and I remember going home and I was like crying, like I cried. And so for months, like we weren't friends. Like me and my best friend that fell out obviously weren't friends, but the other two, like, kind of, I guess. I don't really remember it, to be honest, but it was a difficult period. And that was all within the first year of me joining this new school. So, of course, I had all of these friends, but they were my core group of friends. And I lost them in a way. And I lost my bestest friend. And that was really difficult for me. That was really hard. And like, she just shunned me out and she pushed me away. And I remember like, I would walk home by myself from school and everything. And I would cry on my way home and I would feel like really lonely. And I did make new friends. And so I would hang out with them and everything. And that was cool. But like, that was so difficult. That was really, really difficult. And that was for a couple of months. So we weren't speaking for time. And then my relationship with the other two was fine. And then eventually me and her, we made up and then everything was cool. So that was the only like major fallout that I had in secondary school. But that stayed with me. I'm not going to lie. That I'm the kind of person, like when things happen to me, I harbor it and I feel like really wounded by it. So it was like a noted sort of thing in the back of my head. I was like, okay, cool. This is how people can be. And I don't want to do anything to irritate anyone. I don't want to lose friends. But at the same time, I also didn't like confrontation and I didn't like awkwardness. Do you get what I mean? So I sort of became a bit more, not reserved, but like to myself. Like I would keep people at arm's length in a way. Like I still had friends. I was still close with everyone and everything. But like I was so afraid of going through that again and like losing a friend that I just kept people at an arm's length. But we made up again. So all four of us were cool. Then one of my friends started to like distance herself. So there was a lot of like changes in the friendship group and whatever. But for the most part, like we're all cool, So yeah, I had all these friends in secondary school. I met all these new people, which was so different because obviously when you're in primary school, like you're so used to, those people, like you've grown up with them for years, and then you transition to this new place, then meeting people from all different areas. Not everyone was from Hackney in our secondary school. Most people were, of course, but yeah, like it was cool. It was like not what I had imagined, because obviously, like I said, I grew up watching like American stuff. So I thought, oh yeah, it's gonna be cool. We're gonna have these hallways and whatever. And we did. Our secondary school was actually very nice. I won't lie. And yeah, so I started bridge, and I think, when did I start playing the bass? I think year 7 or year 8. I started playing the bass guitar. So once you start bridge, I don't know if that's the case anymore, but everyone had to learn an instrument. And I remember one of the teachers being like, cool, Awa, you're going to do the bass guitar. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm not going to say no. I've always wanted to learn an instrument. And the bass was easy because it's just 4 strings. So my love for music just grew during this time. Like I loved music. I loved my music lessons. Like we got to, perform at different places. Like at some point we got to perform at, was it the Barbican? Yeah. That was in 6th form, but like we got to do so many things. We got to perform at the South Bank. I was in gospel choir. Like at some point, like I really wanted to sing. That was always my dream. I always wanted to be a performer and a singer. So I loved music and I thrived. Like music was my best subject. It's just recently that I kind of feel like I've pivoted a bit. Like I don't know if music is the direction that I want to go in. But back then, I lived and breathed music. Everyone knew that of me. Everyone knew how much I loved music and how passionate I was about it. And like, yeah, like I was the girl that would play the bass guitar. Oh man, those days were so fun, so fun. And yeah, I think this is where I started to experience like different dynamics with people and relationships, and that's when I started being interested in boys like properly. Obviously primary school I had crushes on people and whatever, but that was back then. Do you get what I mean? And yeah, getting to secondary school, I had a huge huge crush on somebody for years, and I spoke about this in my limerence video. This is where my limerence started. So there was this boy, I don't want to go into it too much because, you know, as much as I want to like open up about things, again, there are other people involved, and obviously this is my version of events and my story, but I don't know, I just don't feel comfortable like going into it too much. But yeah, there was this boy who I really liked, and we became friends because I had a boyfriend in like I think year 7 or year 8, and we were together and we both played the bass guitar, which I thought was so cool. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like me and my boyfriend played the same instrument. It was very much like a typical like school relationship. I barely saw him outside of school. Do you get what I mean? In fact, no, do you know what? I think my limerence might have started with him because it's like I had rose-colored glasses on. I remember like feeling like, oh, I've got this boyfriend, so now I'm not allowed to hug my male friends. I remember like I stopped hugging my male friends. And it was so weird. It was so weird. Sorry guys, my monitor died, so I had to double check it. But I was saying that like it kind of stemmed from that, where I was like, in my head, like I sort of felt like, oh, if you're in a relationship with someone, like you're not allowed to chat to other boys, like you're not allowed to like touch other boys or hug them. Do you get what I mean? So I remember like my male friends like would go in for a hug and I'd be like, oh no, sorry, I've got a boyfriend, like I'm not allowed to. So I think my perception of relationships and love wasn't realistic back then, and it wasn't very healthy. And yeah, I would say it stemmed from my first boyfriend. And then going into me falling for this other person, like I was just like infatuated. I was just so focused on him. Like any other person that was like trying to move to me, like any other boys, I was just not interested. So literally, I'm not even gonna say the majority, like the whole time I was in secondary school, I was so focused on this person. And yeah, like I was just so infatuated, and that's definitely something that I'm going to talk about. The next episode is actually going to be on limerence, so I'm going to go into that in more detail. But yeah, getting to secondary school, I had different experiences with people, like different friendship dynamics, you know, with different girls. Because up until that point, you know, I was so used to like the same group of girls and the same, you know, personalities and energies. Then getting to secondary school, obviously you're going to meet people of all walks of life, and like, yeah, like it was just different for me. But again, when I got to Bridge, I was, you know, definitely someone who was friends with everyone. I hate to say I was popular because I hate that, but I was, you know, excuse me. I was popular. I was friends with everyone. Everyone knew me. I was cool. I was chilled. I never had any issues with anyone apart from, well, there was a few hiccups with a few people. Well, I can count on one hand, like 2 people. Apart from that, I never really had any passa with anyone because I wasn't that sort of person. I was very laid back, you know? So yeah, secondary school was cool. I never had any like behavioral issues to my knowledge. I don't think so. I was very chilled, very laid back, very focused on my books. Like I grew up with that whole thing of like, you need to focus on your books. You need to make sure that you're, you know, getting the grades that you should get, like A's, B's and everything. And, you know, I was very academic for sure. I was very intelligent, very focused. I was never really distracted. I never really got into the mix with people. Of course, I knew girls and people who were like, what's the word? People who liked to like mess around and all of that, but I never mingled with them enough for me to be influenced by that. I was friends with them. I was friends with everyone. Do you get what I mean? But I was very much like focused on education. And I also attribute that to my group of friends because we were all like that. Like we weren't chasing boys like that. We weren't going out, playing out till ridiculous times. Like, of course we had moments where we'd go out and stay out late, but not too much, you know? We were very much good kids, very, very good kids. And yeah, secondary school was really transformative for me because it allowed me to be more independent, like I said, and sort of create connections with people as well, which was really cool. So yeah, that's kind of that. I want to go into more detail with everything, like, later on down the line, because it's going to be long. But I think I really do want to touch on the whole limerence thing, in the next episode, because that's so, like, oh gosh, that's another topic in itself. And that happened during that period of time. So I definitely want to go into more detail and speak about that. But yeah, that's basically my sort of education journey, and school was cool. Not a lot of people can say that. I was lucky. I wasn't bullied. Obviously people would like make fun of my name and whatever, but it wasn't bullying. It was just like little comments here and there, and I could take it. Like, it was funny to me as well. But yeah, I was lucky to not be bullied, and I had a good group of friends as well. Like, I was very, very lucky. And yeah, I would say school was like a smooth ride for me educationally. I would say, like, with everything I was going through at home, it was quite difficult. And again, I think that's something I'm going to touch on in a different episode when it comes to like my relationship with my mum and what I was dealing with and my mental health and everything. Because later on down the line, like year 10, 11, and then sixth form, because I stayed at Bridge for sixth form, I really struggled with my mental health. Like 2016 was the worst year of my life. And there's just so many layers to this. I definitely want to talk about, when my siblings were born. So, there's a lot to talk about, guys. There's a lot to talk about, honestly. So, yeah, that's that. Oh, guys, honestly, like I said, I could talk about so much when it comes to my upbringing and my childhood and everything. Like, I didn't even get to touch on like so many things. Especially like growing up in Hackney, like how much of a like extreme sport that was. Not really, but Hackney has a special place in my heart. Like that area, like I know everyone loves to say, "Oh, East is this, East is that." That's people who are not from East, or you're talking about like places like Bow and Plasto and all. Nah, we I don't. No. I'm talking about real East Hackney. Stoke. Well, Stoke Newington's technically north, isn't it? But Hackney. The east side of Hackney, anyway. Yeah, like growing up in Hackney was great. Like just the community aspect of it all, having my friends in the same vicinity, the culture, like it was so multicultural. Even my secondary school as well, primary school, like there were so many different people. Like I had friends who were from Turkey, who were from Bangladesh, India, obviously Jamaica, Guyana, all over the globe. Like there was just so many different people, so many cultures, so many like languages and everything. And yeah, growing up in Hackney, just the vibe was just amazing. Like when I was young, like it's a bit different now. And again, perhaps that's something I can talk about in future episodes, just like, culture and your environment and how that shapes you as a person. But like I'm a Hackney girl through and through. Like I miss it. I don't live in Hackney anymore. But if I could go back, I definitely would. If I could have my own space there. But obviously it's expensive now. It's expensive. But I hope that someday I can buy a house there because I just love it. It's definitely part of my identity. I just remember how different Dawson used to be and Shoreditch and all of that. Like it's not how it is now. Sorry, it wasn't how it is now. Like it was so different, and I I used to hate Ridley Road Market. Like I hated the market, but it has a special place in my heart. Like I remember the first time I went to Gambia. So I remember going to Banjul and there's Banjul Market, right? And I remember saying, rah, Banjul Market is giving Ridley Road Market is giving Dalston Market. Like what's going on? Dalston needs to step its pussy up, basically. Like I was just like, how can this market look like somewhere in Africa? But I love it. I love it. Like Hackney, oh gosh, like no, we're gonna go into this in another episode, but just my experiences there, I wouldn't change it for the world. I love it. But that's pretty much my early beginnings. yeah, it was a lot to go through. I didn't even get to touch on so many things, but hopefully I can do that in another episode. But that's essentially my upbringing in a nutshell. So, yeah. Right. So, of course, I want to always include a segment, and I like to talk about, self-improvement and things that you can do to better yourself, of course. And so the segment that I want to include, which I've done in the past two episodes, is the glow tip of the week. So this week's glow tip of the week is going out more. So I would advise you to go out, spend time with your friends, like be in your communities, like embrace that, because life is short. And there were moments when I was young where I would really isolate myself and I wouldn't really hang out with my friends as much. And so, like, in hindsight now, I'm just like, damn, I really wish I made the most of that time. And yeah, like now I kind of feel like I'm making up with, I can't speak. I feel like I'm making up for it by like trying to spend more time with my friends, trying to make memories. I think creating memories is really, really important. So my tip and my advice would be go out more, hang out with your friends, make memories. Don't just like go out to eat all the time. Like go to the museum, go to like a pottery class, do something where like you can literally keep it ingrained in your mind. You can remember it. Also, take pictures. I am very lucky that I have so many pictures of myself when I was a kid because, again, my godfather was a photographer. So he would take pictures and, print them off and give them to my mum and everything. And so I have all of these photos and all of these memories. And it's literally like a time capsule. Do you get what I mean? So please make memories, go out, hang out with people. Like, community is very important. So that is my glow tip of the week. And that's a wrap, babe. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of By the Hour. I had an amazing time. I'm just really, really enjoying podcasting. I just wanted to keep this one light because I know the last episode was quite heavy and we went into like really deep topics and everything. But I just wanted you guys to sort of like get a grasp of who I am. There's so much more to me. There's so much to talk about, but we'll get into it at some point. But yeah, that's that for this episode of By the Hour. And please, 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 if you're watching, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're listening to this on any audio platform, please give me a rating. Please comment. Let me know what you think. What do you want me to talk about? Like, do you have any advice? Do you have any tips? Let me know. If you have any dilemmas, if you have any stories that you want to share, please email me at bythehour@gmail.com and I can definitely speak about it on the podcast. Why not? We're here to create a community. Let's create a vibe. Do you get what I mean? So that being said, keep glowing, stay true, and always be unapologetically you. Bye, guys.